Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sports Garden, a podcast about sports. I was about to say NFL, but we're going to do more than just that. But for this episode, we're doing a free agency NFL kind of a recap. Most of the big movers and shakers have all been signed. Depends on how you feel about Aaron Rodgers, I guess, but we didn't want to wait for him to get back from his ayahuasca trip. I'm one of your hosts, Ruben Dario Chavez Jr., a.k.a. Ray Chavo. With me, as always on this program, Joel Mordelaney, a.k.a. Bets with Joel. Joel, are you excited to dive into the NFL free agency?
I am. It's been a pretty exciting offseason, a lot of changes, a lot of good ones to talk about. Unfortunately, as we'll get into later, I'm not so thrilled with what my team has done, but we'll save that for later on.
Yeah, so the format of this one, we're just going to, I think we're going to start off by bringing up the biggest news and maybe giving a quick opinion on those, and then saving more of the nitty-gritty takes for our best and worst moves of the offseason. And then, I guess maybe we could talk about if we think Aaron Rodgers will be a Steeler, because I think that'll have a huge impact on how people see their free agency. I'm going to start with a fun one. I guess, this one may have been seen as not super expected. It's always kind of boring when players just re-sign with their team. But Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both re-signed with the Bengals. And I know there was a lot of talk about, are they going to franchise tag Higgins again? Chase really wanted to get paid a good amount. And I think a lot of people were questioning whether the Bengals could afford to extend both of them to the level that clearly the two receivers wanted to. They both got 4 years. I think Chase got 151 and Higgins got 113 or something around that, like 115. So it's a lot of money on offensive players between them and Joe Burrow. There's not going to be a lot of money left for the defensive side of the ball, so to speak. But Joel, you were one of the biggest T. Higgins supporters throughout the last NFL season. You kept telling people he was going to be good, and you were right in the end. He had a pretty good year overall. But do you like the move? Do you think it was a good one? Did they kind of have to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jamar Chase is arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. And one thing I learned from being a Jamar Chase and T. Higgins owner in fantasy is that these guys actually complement each other. Specifically T. Higgins, I think when he's on the field, it does open up a lot for Chase, but it also, it has the inverse effect as well. Like, if Chase is missing time, then they're going to blanket Higgins. Or if you only have one of the two guys on your team, it's pretty easy for defenses to kind of key into that. So I do think that locking up both of them for 4 years is amazing, because we saw last year, even if they don't play defense, we know their offense can go toe-to-toe with anyone. And you would have to imagine that, now that they have those guys locked in, it's going to be a pure focus on defense, especially with the emergence of Chase Brown in the backfield. He looked like a stud too. So you've got a loaded offense. And the thing with T. Higgins, everyone talks about the injuries, but if he was a wide receiver on a lot of different teams in the NFL, he would be their number one. So
Sure.
I think getting those two guys locked up was huge. Like you said, it was like $161 million for Chase, $116 for T. Higgins. So yeah, some great moves. And they also actually did some things on defense too, that I'll just mention real quick since we're talking about the Bengals. They re-signed B.J. Hill for 3 years. He was basically their highest graded run defender. So I mean, that's always great. They also got Akeem Davis-Gaither, so they kind of improved at linebacker there as well. And then you'd have to imagine in the draft they're probably going to be, focusing on the defensive side of the ball. And then the only other thing I wanted to say about that team is, it looked like they were ready to let Trey Hendrickson kind of walk, but they've since sort of, clawed that back, and it looks like they're going to sign him next year when he's a free agent. And if you guys don't know, he was the sack leader in this past season. So A great.
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah.
I think that's what made it ultimately feel good as well. That who knows how it'll work out, but they definitely are not punting on Trey, which felt like it was very much in the cards for a bit there. People were kind of thinking that he was going to get traded. It sounded like they were going to allow him to find a trade if he wanted to. They were part on the money, but now it seems they're really determined to get him. I'm kind of with you. Like, they kept together probably the best combo, like the best wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 combo in the league. So you can't really be too upset about that. Another big move that happened, let's stay with the wide receivers. We can bunch these together because I have similar concerns about both of these people. Davante Adams went to the Rams, 2 years, $44 million. And Stephon Diggs signed with the Patriots, 3 years, $69 million. It's fair to say that last year didn't go the way either one of them would have expected to or wanted. Davante Adams started off on the Raiders, kind of strong-armed his way out a bit. Not strong-armed, but he clearly wanted to move on once Aaron Rodgers made it clear that he wanted him to be a Jet. He got his wish. Him and Rodgers, I think down the stretch, connected a little more, but it definitely wasn't a vintage Rodgers season, and it definitely wasn't a vintage Davante Adams season. And for Stephon Diggs, we thought that he was going to take the Texans to kind of new heights. We thought he was going to be the gas that was going to propel that rocket ship, right? In a way, the Texans last year were what the Commanders were this year that just passed, right? It was like hot new QB. They look a lot more electric and dynamic, and you add this receiver who, despite his character issues, has been a dynamic player. People expected a lot, but Stephon Diggs ends up getting hurt, misses a huge chunk of the season. Now both of these guys land on different teams with, honestly, I think they have two different remits, right? Like for Davante Adams, he's basically there. He's the Cooper Kupp replacement. Kupp's definitely not coming back, it seems like. And it's the last bits of we're pushing all in. For a bit, it looked like Stafford was going to leave. Stafford walked that back. I guess he didn't want to be traded to the Raiders. He's like, no, I've seen how that goes. And for Diggs, the Patriots are kind of trying to get back to a respectable place. Last year, they ended up firing Mayo in his first year in the job. They were kind of up and down inconsistent, but it looks like they found someone in Drake May. So I guess both of these players, wide receivers that maybe are past their best. Which deal do you like more? Do you like them both? Or what are your thoughts on these two receivers finding new teams?
Yeah, so I definitely like one more than the other. And as you said about Cooper Kupp, he signed with the Seahawks, so he's definitely not coming back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like the signing for the Rams. I think Davante Adams, I do still think he has, there is something there. I saw the flashes at the end of last season. And look, when you compare the Rams and the Jets, I mean, you're talking about complete stability and complete chaos, right? And I think for him to go to a team like the Rams with a great coach like Sean McVay, a guy in Matt Stafford that's a Super Bowl champion, I think it's the perfect landing spot for him. And as a compliment to Puka Nacua, I mean, these guys are both physical beasts, and whichever one you decide to not double team, they're gonna win in man coverage. So I thought it was a great move for them. I also thought that Cooper Kupp kind of starting to lose it, and I thought it made sense to let him go. It's kind of hard, and it sucks to say it because of how good he was. But the injuries have just really derailed him, and I'm sure we'll get into the Seahawks here at some point because they've made a lot of changes as well. But to touch on the other side of the coin, Stephon Diggs is a guy that I always really liked on the Bills. A bit of a head case, but I like guys that they're emotional, they're passionate, right? But can you channel that to positive use? And I think in Buffalo, it wasn't really so positive, and that's kind of why they moved on from him. And, like you said, coming into Houston, expectations were high. Him, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, for CJ Stroud, you just have a plethora of great options. So it was sad to see him get hurt because we won't truly know what could have been. But I do think for the Patriots, yes, they need to improve their wide receiver room, but would I have paid Stephon Diggs what they paid him? I don't really think so. I just think coming off a big injury like that, he's a little bit older. To me, like they really missed out on some other guys. Like they were going after T. Higgins, they were going after Godwin. They didn't get any of them, right? So they kind of just settled with Stephon Diggs. And to me, at that point, I mean, I think they should have just went in the draft and tried to get oh my god, I'm blanking, the wide receiver quarterback guy.
Travis Hunter.
Yeah, like why not try to get him, or I don't know. So for me, I do think the Rams, I like that addition for them more than the Patriots. But in terms of the Patriots, since we're talking about them, like they spent the most money out of any team in free agency. So, they're trying to improve their team. And if you're a Patriots fan, you're happy about that. But in terms of, specifically Stephon Diggs, we'll have to wait and see. But I would say I'm not a fan of that. But I don't know. What do you think?
I'm kind of with you. I like Diggs, or I've liked him at times, but I do think his attitude gets him into trouble, and he could be a bit of a head case in a way that can be detrimental. Him and Josh Allen had a really good partnership there for a while, and then it kind of fell off a bit with Diggs getting frustrated and obviously maybe questioning what his role in the offense was. Last year felt like a missed opportunity for him, because if he doesn't get hurt, and honestly, if that team was just better, the Texans had a down year. Their offensive line couldn't really block. Stroud had one of the biggest sophomore slumps that I think we've seen in a bit. It just looked ugly. Like, even games that they won sometimes didn't even feel good. They beat the Bills, I think, didn't they? Or no, the Bills beat them. Oh no, they did, right? They did. They beat and it was an ugly game. Like, neither side was doing much. So this is an opportunity for him, I guess, to rehab his career a bit. I guess on his side, I wonder if he's going to really be happy playing for a team that the best case scenario is second place in the division and maybe a wild card spot. He said he's wanted to win. He'll get targets, right? Like, if he stays healthy, Drake May doesn't really have that many other people to throw to, so it's going to be him and Drake May kind of partnering up. But I also have concerns, his age, his injury, his history, and his fit overall with where the team is. But I'm sure on some level, Vrabel just wanted, and, the front office just wanted to get May. My Apple Watch is talking to me. To get May like an actual target, and to get him somebody to help his development. So on that level, yeah, good deal. Do I think it makes them that much better? No, but you got your quarterback a blanket, and that's nice. It's a little security blanket. And when it comes to Devontae Adams, I think you kind of knocked that out of the park. I completely agree with you. I think it's a great move. He has more juice than Cooper Kupp, and I think bringing him to the West Coast, a place that we know he likes to play, and get him on a team with a lot more stability and a better coach than he's had in both the Jets and the Raiders. Like, this could have, not to the same level, obviously, because Matt Stafford isn't Tom Brady and Devontae Adams isn't Randy Moss, but it could have a bit of that. Like, we can see two people really just click and get the last little bit of juice out of their careers. And that division's kind of up in the air. This isn't a division preview, but like, I think it's up in the air.
You kind of just took the thought right out of my head, because the next thing I was going to say is, since we just started talking about the Rams, like, whenever that line opens for the NFC West division winner, like, I'm going to be at the window saying, can I get a Rams ticket, please? Because the Niners got worse. The Seahawks got worse. And I just have no faith in Kyler Murray being, like,
the guy, basically.
Yeah, being someone that's going to overtake the Rams in this division. So, yeah, like you said, we're not talking about, division preview. We're going to be doing that later on this summer. But maybe if you want, we could talk about...
Well, let's talk about the Seahawks moves because you teased it earlier, and we're in the division. So there's three big moves that pertain to the Seahawks. I guess four, but we already told you that Cooper Kupp is going there, and I think with our answer about Devontae Adams, you can tell how highly we feel about Cooper Kupp. But Geno Smith was traded to the Raiders for a third-round pick. It seemed very clear that the Seahawks didn't want to pay him, so the Raiders were looking for a stable QB, and they got one. Because they traded away Geno Smith, they signed Sam Darnold, 3 years, $105.5 million. From what I read, basically after this season, if it goes really bad, they can kind of cut him without too much guaranteed money on the books. It's a very front-loaded contract, kind of like, let's see what version of Sam Darnold we get. And then the last move, they traded away some talent. DK Metcalf, someone who's also been accused of being a head case, was traded to the Steelers, and then he signed a 5-year, $150 million contract there in Pittsburgh. Clearly, the Seahawks also weren't willing to back up that sort of money for him. So you already kind of teased what you think, but yeah, tell me why you think the Seahawks got worse.
I just think, like, you replace your quarterback with another quarterback that I think I can speak for both of us here, we both don't believe in the sense, like, for me, if I'm a GM putting together a team, when I'm adding a quarterback to my team, kind of adding a quarterback is like, this is someone that I see that could win a Super Bowl. And we saw last year when the lights were the brightest, Sam Darnold came crashing back down to reality. So for me, replacing Geno with him, like, I mean, there's some good to it in the sense that, like, okay, you're getting a younger, basically like similar level of quarterback, right? And it's kind of like you said, they can cut ties if they're not feeling it. So for me, they kind of just went from having a quarterback that's not really going to take them anywhere to being in the same spot, right? And quarterback's the most important position. For me, like, I would rather just be a horrible, horrible team than be constantly stuck as like an 8-8 football team. Because when are you going to be able to, get past that hump? Like, it's hard, right? Sometimes you need to just fully blow it up. And I think the Seahawks are a team that, like, they've been teeter-tottering on that line for a while, basically since they lost Russell Wilson and the Legion of Boom. And then losing DK Metcalf and replacing him with Cooper Kupp, I mean, that's a downgrade for sure. Like, Kupp would have to be playing at his Triple Crown level, for me to like that move. And I do think, DK, there's always like some head case stuff, like, for sure, but you can't deny the physical talent is there. And I do think that the quarterback play, had him very frustrated. And, like, it kind of all comes down to the quarterback. And speaking of the quarterback, Geno Smith was sacked the second most times last season. And now Sam Darnold is behind that offensive line, to which, based on the notes I have in front of me, they haven't really addressed. I think they signed one offensive tackle. So, yeah. I mean, yes, you kind of sign these guys to put, like, I don't know if you ever seen that meme of, like, the guy pasting the thing over the hole where the water's coming out.
Yeah.
But it kind of feels like that. And it's like, they made some good signings on defense. Like, they got DeMarcus Lawrence from the Cowboys, and, they retained some of their guys that are good, like Ernest Jones, Reed. But it's like, do you really see the Seahawks as anything more than just a 500 football team fighting for wild card? And, like, that's kind of where they still are. So, yeah, to me, that was actually one of the teams I wrote down on my list as one of the biggest losers was the Seahawks.
Yeah, we can both agree with that. I didn't have them on mine, but I agree that they are one of the biggest losers of the offseason for everything you just said, Despite whatever problems DK Metcalf can cause, he's a very talented wide receiver with a physical profile that projects well, and he's a dynamic part of that offense. Replacing him with Cooper Kupp is crazy. Like in terms of like if you're trying to be a competitive team, which to your point, if you're signing a free agent like veteran-ish quarterback, you're kind of signaling like we want to be competitive and build on what we did last year. I don't see how they do. Their offensive line was weak last year, and it looks like it's going to be weak this year. You would assume they're going to target offensive line in the draft and those kind of positions through the draft. We'll see if they can get good players and if that's going to work out for them. But to me, they took a step back at QB. And Darnold is someone who we've seen doesn't do well under pressure. Like he kind of, the success in Minnesota was they could run the ball really well. They had a great offensive line, and then they had Justin Jefferson. I don't know if you can approximate that with JSN, Cooper Kupp, and then their backfield, which like Kenneth Walker, I've had him in fantasy like 2 years in a row now, kind of gets hurt a lot, is a fun runner. And then Charbonnet, who probably deserves more of that backfield with how he looks when Walker's not there. But they're both, I don't know, I don't know if they're like Saquon Barkley style backs. So like I find it really hard to see this team improving. So for that, I kind of agree that they're a loser. On the flip side, Geno going to the Raiders feels like a very Raiders move, but I guess like if they really think they're out of the loop for one of the top QB picks as a bridge QB, and it seems like Tom Brady in whatever capacity he's helping this organization just wants proven winners or people that at least he thinks can win and who have been around the league. Because why else would he bring Pete Carroll and Geno Smith and kind of just like, and they were targeting Stafford from what was being floated out there. So like, it seems they just want guys that can play and that have a certain level of like standards to kind of rebuild the organization. Because, you know, I'm sympathetic to the Raiders, as we've mentioned on this podcast before, but they've kind of been on and off a joke for like the majority of our lives. Like there was a couple good years there with Derek Carr, but like it, you know, since the John Gruden Super Bowl, since that John Gruden era where they end up losing to Gruden in the Super Bowl when he was coaching the Bucs, they haven't been a team that you're like, oh yeah, that's a playoff team. That's a model organization. Like, you know, we're talking about, would you rather be like mediocre every year, 8-8, maybe get a wild card? They've just been ass, but with no sense of direction. There's been no plan, so they haven't built. You look at some of it's been bad luck. I mean, they drafted Henry Ruggs, and then Henry Ruggs did what he did. But some of the draft picks have been brutal. They drafted Jamarcus Russell, who's been like, he's probably the biggest bust in the NFL history, right? And then you have the other guys who are like, even guys they drafted that are good, like Amari Cooper has had most of his best times outside of the Raiders, and he left years ago. Josh Jacobs, who again was good on the Raiders, looked really good in Green Bay last year. So even the talent that they hit on, they can't keep. Khalil Mack, so I think Tom Brady just wants to get some stability. It's hard to love or hate that move. I'm just kind of like, yeah, they wanted a veteran QB. I don't think there was a better option than Geno Smith available to them. So yeah, kudos to them.
I do think that ultimately the biggest thing that I take away from it is the culture. I think it starts with the culture. And you look at a team like the Commanders, you know, it's easy to say because of how great Jaden Daniels was, but I do think bringing in a guy like Dan Quinn, you know, changing the culture of that team, new ownership, like we saw like the players rally around kind of that mentality. And I think, you know, with Tom Brady, Pete Carroll, it's kind of like the same idea that the Raiders are going for here. Like you said, they've been a laughingstock for how long? It's been a revolving door at head coach for many, many years, right? So now you kind of bring in some stability with Pete Carroll. You bring in a stable quarterback with Geno Smith. And like, there's no argument he immediately makes the team better, right?
Yeah.
Because before that, you're just throwing out Gardner Minshew and Desmond Ridder. Like, at least with Geno Smith, like, if you can keep him protected, like, you know he can win you football games, right? So, you know, reuniting him with Pete Carroll, they're trying to bring stability, change the culture. So I think all that is great. And then you extended Max Crosby, which is, you know, huge because, like, you're kind of saying with all these moves that you made that, like, okay, we're trying to right this ship. My problem is when you look at that division, you're looking at Patrick Mahomes, right? You're looking at Bo Nix and Justin Herbert. The Broncos, we saw last year, got infinitely better. They're starting to build something special there. It's only the beginning. You look at the Chargers. Yes, they had a disappointing playoff loss, but I think, again, they're going to come back stronger. They're building something. Harbaugh, Herbert, right? We know the Chiefs are the Chiefs. And then you look at the Raiders and you go, oh, Geno Smith and Pete Carroll, like, we've seen this story before.
Yeah.
So, while, yes, they improved their team, but for me, it's kind of like, to what end? And there's another
I'm with you
that we'll get into, kind of that did similar thing. But I'll let you share any other thoughts you have before I jump on to my other team.
I think if the team that you want to jump to is one of your worst, we can just finish up talking about our worst moves and best moves. I think we hit all the bigger deals, and I'm sure some of the other big deals are going to be a part of moves we thought were good or bad. So if you want to
make my worst, because in my opinion, this team that I'm referencing, which is the Giants,
they're on mine. That's funny.
Well, yeah, so I'll just finish kind of my thought and let you go. But the reason why they didn't make my worst was because they actually had, like, some nice pickups on the defensive side of the ball. But again, like, it all comes back to the quarterback. And for me, this Giants team, when you bring in Jameis Winston, you bring in Russell Wilson. First of all, I don't know what the point of having both of them.
Say
one or the other is fine. But even for me, I wouldn't have paid either. Like, I'll just throw Tommy DeVito out there, right? And then I'll just sign like a Trent or like a who's like a famous backup quarterback, like a Marcus Mariota.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good.
Yeah. But yeah, for me, the Giants, like, it's you improve slightly, right, by bringing in a guy like Russell Wilson. But it's, again, the argument, to what end? So now you're going to win a couple more football games. You're going to get worse draft picks, right? And then the thing is, you're not competing in that division. Like, there's no way. So I just don't understand it. But yeah, they didn't really make the worst for me, just because, you know, they did make some moves on defense to improve, which I liked, like Javon Holland, Paulson Adebo. There's quite a few guys that they signed. They spent a lot of money actually on the defense. So let me know why you have them as one of your worst.
So a lot of it is for the reasons that you said. I don't understand bringing in both Jameis and Russ, especially, like, when it was just Jameis, I was like, that's kind of perfect, because Jameis is a very, like, risk-taking QB who's just going to feed Malik Neighbors. Like, Jameis has never seen coverage that will dissuade him from giving the ball to his number one receiver. I don't think he's ever seen it. He just fires it in there. And I honestly thought that if you had Neighbors in, like, Dynasty or, like, a keeper league, or you could get him in a redraft league, he was going to feast. Now with Russ, I'm assuming it's a competition, but if Russ is the QB1 and Jameis is supposed to be the backup, Russ doesn't really play an aggressive style. He's not going to push the ball downfield. And he's way past the time of his life where he's taking risks and extending plays with his legs consistently. So to me, it just kind of felt like, why bring two veteran quarterbacks who both have shown that they're not really quarterbacks to get you over the hump in a division that I don't think they can win? Like, the Cowboys had a really bad year last year. If they regress more to the mean of what they've been recently, and Dak Prescott's out there and healthy, like, they're a better team than than the Giants. The Eagles are the Super Bowl champs, and they still have Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, and AJ Brown, and Devonta Smith, and all the people that made. They re-signed Zach Braun, which I thought was a really good move for them, and how important he's been. And then the Commanders, like, again, you're basically praying for a sophomore slump, some regression from Jaden Daniels to open up a window to compete in this division, but I still think you're the fourth best team. So this could be the worst case scenario where they don't get anywhere near winning the division, they don't make a playoff spot, and they're just like a middling team that's going to have a bad draft pick next year in a draft where there's a lot of talented quarterbacks that could go in those top picks.
They're going to go from like a 2 to 3 win football team to like a 4 to 6 at most win football team. And then it's like exactly like you said. Then next year when all these QB needy teams are, bottom of the barrel, lined up, ready to get their draft pick, the Giants are going to be on the outside looking in because they won meaningless games that ultimately will not mean anything for them. There's no way they're winning the division. And since we're talking about the division and you mentioned the Cowboys, that was one of the teams that made my worst list, my top 3 worst. Look, the Cowboys, okay, first of all, Zach Martin retired, right? So that's not something that they can, you can't blame.
You can't really it's not their fault.
So you lose, your best offensive lineman, right? And then you don't pay Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle walks, and you already had a problem at running back, right? They didn't pay Derrick Henry. We saw Rico Dowdle out there, and I actually thought towards the end of the year, Rico Dowdle showed me something. If I was the Cowboys, I would have wanted to retain him personally. But instead, you replaced Rico Dowdle with Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams. That's a downgrade for me. Neither of those guys pushed the needle. We saw on the Broncos, Javonte, he doesn't have it, bro. He doesn't have it. Miles Sanders at this point is a third string at best. So you got worse at running back. Your offensive line got worse. And the problem with this team to begin with was that they were always putting too much on Dak Prescott's shoulders. They weren't running the football effectively. It made them very predictable. And in terms of throwing the ball in the air, it's CeeDee Lamb or nothing. And guess what? It's still CeeDee Lamb or nothing. They didn't sign a premier wide receiver 2 when the wide receiver 2 market was very good. Even, guys like Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, T. Higgins, can you imagine if the Cowboys went out and got one of those guys? It just makes CeeDee Lamb's life that much better, right? It makes things easier for both him and Prescott. Instead, they just re-signed, Kevontae Turpin. Okay, we signed Paris Campbell. It's they just got these kind of just no-name guys. And so, to me, and then you also lose, oh my God, I'm blanking. Oh, DeMarcus Lawrence, right? So, they lost a couple other defenders as well. So, I just don't understand, what is this team doing? And to me, my outlook for the Cowboys next year is, if I'm power ranking that division, I have them third.
So, yeah, I agree with that, 100%.
So, really, I mean, what is the Cowboys' plan now? Because the Cowboys, to me, are starting to look like almost a worse version of the Seahawks. You're just going to be this middling team with wild card aspirations, and then if you do get in, you're not going anywhere. At least that's my thought. We'll have to see how the season plays out, and maybe we'll circle back to this. But that was one of my top 3 worst. I'm not sure if you still have any of your worst that would like to mention.
The San Francisco 49ers. Look, I hit on that prediction last season more than anything else. That and the Commanders. I was right that the Commanders would make the playoffs, which seemed crazy when I said it in the preseason, and I was right that the Niners were going to take a huge step back. Now, part of that had to do with injury, but they've also bled a lot of talent now. Some of that being players that were injured. Obviously, they traded Debo to the Commanders, and they lost Travarius Ward and a ton of talent on both sides of the ball. They had to take they're lumps, kind of like they didn't have a lot of money to play with after the extensions for some of their players kicked in. It looked like Ayuk might be out the door, but now it seems like they're trying to keep him around, even though there were rumors about trading him. It's a lot to leave, and like they signed DeMarcus Robinson. I actually like DeMarcus Robinson. I think he did all right with the Rams, but he's not great. You're really putting a lot on Brock Purdy's shoulders now, because Ayuk did not have a good year last year. He was super inconsistent, very up and down, and he got hurt. And then it's just like you're really hoping that DeMarcus Robinson and Ricky Pearsall and some of those guys, Juwan Jennings and those guys really take a step forward and prove that they can be counted on. They did well down the stretch. Like, you know, Juwan Jennings won people a couple weeks there in fantasy, like in the middle of all those injuries and stuff. But is that sustainable for a season in a division that's kind of tough? Like, and I don't know. I guess it depends on how you feel about the NFC West, but I didn't like their offseason one bit. And yeah, the only other one, Saquon.
Before you go, actually, it's a good to one of my top 3 best offseason teams in terms of changes. And speaking of 49ers players, this is a team that signed a bunch of 49ers players. And part of the reason why, like you said, you think the 49ers got worse, and I agree with you. They lost their safety, Talanoa Hufanga, who I think is a very good safety. They lost Dre Greenlaw. We know Dre Greenlaw, if he can get right and get healthy, like, this guy's an elite linebacker. So, I mean, this is a Broncos team that last year, this defense, like, it blew me away in terms of my expectations. Like, I had no expectations for this team as a whole. Defensively, I mean, we know Pat Surtain is like the next coming of God. But outside of him, like, I didn't really have much expectations. But their defensive line was great, and now you bring in Hufanga and Greenlaw, and you just kind of improve your defense even more. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I think signing Evan Ingram was just a great signing. Like, this is a tight end that has, like, freak-like ability in terms of, like, he's got that DK Metcalf, like, body style, you know?
Yeah.
And I think for a young quarterback, having a good tight end like that can win over the middle and beat man coverage, it also helps a guy like Courtland Sutton. And then we saw some of their other tools, like Marvin Mims, you know, like they have quite a lot there in Denver. And with Sean Payton, you know, this is only the beginning. Like, that offense is just going to keep getting better. So for me, you improved on both sides of the ball. So yeah, the Denver Broncos were one of my top 3.
I actually had them in my top 3 as well for exactly everything you said. And they were a team last year that defensively took a big step forward, partly because, like, Pat Surtain shuts down one whole side of the field. But they were really good on that side of the ball, and they basically just added more talent to it. We've seen the formula with these rookie QBs when they're on cheap deals. Get talent around them, make the game easy for them. I wouldn't be surprised if in the draft they target some really high-value skill players, maybe like a running back to help the run game, or a wide receiver or something. Say, no matter where they go, like, it's Sean Payton. Like, I'm a bit biased. I'm a Saints fan, and he brought us a lot of good years. But he does seem to have a profile of player that he likes, and he usually gets the most out of them in regards to his offense or his defense. They have a really good team. It's really solid. They're in a tough division, which is the only thing that could hold them back. But I mean, last year, 3 of those teams made the playoffs, right? Like, so that's just like, that could happen again. It's in the cards. So yeah, they're a definite winner. I'll say my last loser that I have.
Actually, before you go, I just think there was a great segue there for me, because you mentioned, surrounding your rookie, or like your quarterback that's on a QB, or sorry, your quarterback that's on a rookie deal with talent. And that was basically 2 teams. The other 2 teams on my biggest winner list did exactly that. So I'll just go through them real quick, because I thought, like, that kind of worked perfectly with what I wanted to say. The first of those 2 teams is the Bears.
Yeah.
Caleb Williams was the most sacked quarterback in football last year. You know, this is a guy you drafted first overall. You're building your team around him. And what did they do this offseason? They significantly improved the offensive line. So, I mean, the Bears are doing a great job, in my opinion. Besides that, they also added some guys on offense and defense. They got Grady Jarrett from the Falcons. Like, he's been our best defensive lineman for like, got to be 10 plus years now. So I just thought the Bears did a great job, and specifically surrounding Caleb Williams with basically an elite offensive line. Like, they got the Falcons center as well, Drew Dahlman. He was the 4th highest graded center in PFF. They got Joe Thuney from the Chiefs, one of the best offensive linemen as well. So some amazing moves from the Bears. And just one more I wanted to mention as well. The Vikings, another team, again, with the quarterback on a rookie deal, right? Assuming that JJ McCarthy is going to be the guy, it looks like that's going to be the case. They improved the trenches on both sides of the ball. They spent the second most money out of any team in free agency. So like we said, surrounding your quarterback with talent, right? Giving your young quarterback a great offensive line to work behind, it can only improve your team. So that's why those two made my top 3 list along with the Broncos.
Yeah, I actually had those two as teams that I considered winners. The only one that we haven't mentioned that I'll mention, it's tough when teams are already paying a lot of money at QB and are already teams that are competing, but I actually like the deals that the Ravens did. They extended Ronnie, they got DeAndre Hopkins, who I think, even though he had a limited opportunity to show it in a Kansas City offense that looked really bad at times, I think he still has some juice. Like, I think he saw some juice. So I like it. I like that they retained some talent. I like that they got a new receiver to help Lamar Jackson. It wasn't a splashy offseason, but you know, the other team that I had as a big winner, again, rookie QB on the deal. I liked what the Commanders did. They traded for Laramie Tunzel, who I think is a really good lineman. It's important to protect your QB, as we've talked about with some of these other teams that are weak on the offensive line. So I think that's huge. And they traded for Deebo Samuels. And again, like, however you feel about Deebo and how much you think he still has left in the tank, like, obviously that'll be important, but I still think it shows, like, that they are trying to put pieces around him to help, you know? And I think that Deebo going to a new offense, having a new, hopefully, offensive coordinator that can get more out of him will be good. So I really like those, though. That's all my winners. Do you want to talk about, you said you wanted to talk about one of your losers that you haven't. I think it's your team. It's the Falcons.
There's one loser left, the biggest loser of them all. You can see it on my head. The Atlanta Falcons. Look, I can't remember a free agency with such a good, like, pass rushing availability compared to this one in a long time. Like, the list of pass rushers that were available in this free agency, and it was absolutely elite. Like, you're talking Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, Micah Parsons, like, who am I missing here? Bosa.
Yeah, John Bosa.
Even Max Crosby. Like,
did you say Josh Sweat? Wasn't he up?
Yeah. So, like, you know, at the start of this window, like, I mean, it was like the options were amazing. And what did we end up with? Leonard Floyd. And look, Leonard Floyd, yes, he's a good defensive edge rusher. But the thing is, like, he's an older veteran. This is just kind of like that meme I talked about earlier where you slap the tape over the leak. Like, you're not really addressing the core of the problem. You're kind of just, like, putting a stopgap in place. And so to me, like, it was inexcusable to come out of that market without an elite edge rusher. So I don't know, like, what we're doing in that regard. And then we let Grady Jarrett go, who's our best defensive lineman. So defensive line was already our biggest problem, and you let go of your best defensive lineman and he's also a captain of the team. He's like the heart and soul of that locker room. You know, he's been there for his whole career. So just a really head-scratching season. We also lost our center, who, like I mentioned a little earlier in the show, was the 4th highest graded center for PFF last year, and that's not easy to replace. And then lastly, Kirk Cousins. You know, I'm still hearing rumblings that he's going to be a Cleveland Brown, or he's going to maybe the Pittsburgh
That
Steelers.
would be crazy.
Like, it does seem like, you know, he wants to be a starter. But everything I've heard in terms of from Terry and the Falcons is that, like, we want him as our backup. So I think they're just playing hard to get and trying to wait until the draft happens. And then if one of these QB needy teams still needs a quarterback, then they're going to pull the trigger on it and try to get the most. I think realistically we'll get like a third. If we got a third, I think that would be great. Probably maybe a fourth. But there's a line where they won't let him go. So I'm curious to see what happens there. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, the Falcons for me, mostly because of the edge rusher situation. That was my biggest loser, and that rounds out all my biggest losers and winners. So if you had any more, take it away.
I just have one more loser, and actually it links to what you're saying. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. And look, I actually like the trade for Metcalf. It definitely makes Steelers games a lot more watchable with him and George Pickens lining up on the same team. That's like a recipe for
game.
Yeah, it's a recipe for some explosive. Well, yeah. But the problem is you have these two receivers, one of which in Pickens has, kicked up a fuss about who's throwing him the ball in the past. And currently, they've lost both quarterbacks that they had on the roster last year because Fields is a New York Jet and Russell Wilson, as we talked about, is a Giant. They both went to the state of New York. I had to really put that together in my head until just now. And presumably they're waiting on Rodgers. They're just waiting to see if Rodgers signs. Everything seems to point that Steelers are one of Rodgers' most likely options. It seems like it's the Steelers or the Vikings. Why the Vikings would choose to sign up for that, also kind of weird to me. I think just roll with JJ and see what you got. But they were a team that, looked really good last year. Maybe they don't want to take that big a step back. So it's hard to say. But I think whether or not Rodgers goes, the amount of time they've kind of frozen their free agency waiting for him, when would it have been worse to sign Justin Fields, who won you a couple games early on with these two receivers, or just stick with Russ, or target Jameis, who has a big arm, and give him these receivers with a good defense. Mike Tomlin is famously a coach that says that he doesn't run away from coaching people, and that part of being a coach is to fix the players' mistakes and all that stuff. If he could turn Jameis Winston into a Super Bowl level quarterback, I think it would be great. It would prove his coaching acumen even more. I don't like how long they've waited around for Aaron Rodgers, and whether or not they get him, I don't think I'll like this team more or less. That's a really tough division. It's besides the Browns, it's a tough division. And and if you're a Falcons fan, I think you're hoping Rodgers doesn't sign there, because then they have to trade for Kirk Cousins, because it's either that or they're literally starting Mason Rudolph.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's no way that they're gonna start Mason Rudolph that. Yeah. But I get what you mean. He's currently their QB1. So yeah, to me, where I stand on Justin Fields. Aaron Rodgers is not an upgrade over Justin Fields at this point in his career, in my opinion. I wanted Justin Fields to be a Falcon when he was a free agent. When he left the Bears, we didn't sign him. Hey, we got Penix now, so, I'm happy about that. But I just don't get how these teams, they keep passing him over. I personally do think he has a high ceiling that we haven't seen quite yet. So I'm very interested to see what happens with the Jets, which is a team we didn't really get into. But I do think, bringing in a new coach over there, fixing the culture. Seems like Aaron Glenn is not fucking around. Justin Fields, I like what the Jets did personally, but to keep it
did
the
too.
Steelers, I couldn't agree more with you. Like, this is a mess. And the other thing is, like, I don't think Tomlin's long for this world. Like, bro, like, Arthur Smith is not the guy. Like, this guy is horrible. Trust me when I say this, guys. Arthur Smith is not, he should not be an offensive coordinator in the National Football League. So if you're telling me that the Steelers are going to roll out there with Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith, and then DK Metcalf and George Pickens, like, this is just a ticking time bomb, like, between Rodgers dying on the field and your both your diva wide receivers exploding because Arthur Smith decides to throw it to, like, the 3 different tight ends on the team and, like, the third string guys. Like, that's what he's gonna do. Or he's gonna do, like, a handoff to Cordero Patterson. Like,
oh yeah,
so I mean,
his guy.
yeah, the Steelers, I almost feel bad for them, but I don't.
Well,
they've been such a good team for so long. It's finally time.
And I think they're kind of the perfect team to illustrate. And I think when Nick was on the pod last, we kind of talked about I don't know if we talked about it, but Nick is very passionate about how people shouldn't celebrate Mike Tomlin for having a winning record and going like 9-8 or not having a losing record, like when he used to go 8-8 and all that, because it leaves them in kind of a limbo. And this free agency kind of proved his point, because again, I don't think they got better. And they don't have an avenue to improve at the position that they need the most, which is quarterback, in any real way right now. And I was looking at some mock drafts, and like one of the ones I saw has them taking a running back out of North Carolina at the 21st pick. So that's like their first pick of the draft. You're not going to find the QB in this draft that low. Like, no way. Like, this is a shallow draft anyways. You're not...
need quarterbacks.
Yeah. And then, again... best case scenario for them, they get Kirk Cousins, they get Aaron Rodgers, they beat up on some of those bad teams. Do they fall out of the top 10 of the draft again next year and then they don't have a quarterback? Like,
my thing is, like, even if you get Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers, like, is this team really threatening to win a Super Bowl?
No, I don't
think so, right? So it's like, what are we even doing here? Like, to me, they're just wasting away TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick. Like, they should have addressed this. Like, I mean, they could have just stuck with Fields last year. He was, I think, 3-1 when they decided to pull him.
Yeah, maybe he only lost
2 or something. And yeah, the Russell Wilson experiment failed. And then at that point, they're like, well, I guess we're not going back to Fields. So I honestly, like, to me, the Steelers, this is going to be a team that's going to be miserable for the next 10 to 15 years, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's not shaping up to be good. And like you say, like,
sorry to cut you off, but like, how are they going to get past the Bengals or the Ravens?
I don't see it.
Right? As long as Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson are there, how are the Steelers going to get past? Like, good, amazing defense can only take you so far.
Yeah, especially in this NFL, like this version of the NFL. We're so far past
early 2000s NFL anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
no, 100%.
Yeah, so.
So those are all my winners and losers, and we touched on some of the big notes. Did you have anything else you wanted to discuss or talk about when it comes to the free agency?
Yeah,
or in general, I guess.
Like where I'm at too. I think I mentioned sort of everyone that I wanted to. There's some teams we didn't talk about, but I think all the big stuff we kind of went through. So yeah, just gonna be interested to see what happens with the draft, and then how that changes kind of our outlook on these topics, and maybe that'll be something we revisit post draft. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, and yeah, I look forward to talking about it more.
Yeah, for sure. It is the off season for all of you that watch. Obviously, you know that, but we are gonna have content about the NFL. We're gonna do like division look aheads, and like Joel just said, after the draft, we might talk about within that what we think that changes and stuff like that. We're gonna do some fantasy content about kind of looking back at our 2 years, because we're in 2 fantasy leagues together, talking about what we thought went well, what we thought went poorly, and maybe some players we want to have, because me and Joel are in 1 redraft league and 1 keeper league. So So we've even discussed like having like who we think is in a redraft, who are the 12 best players that should go in that first round. So content like that. And the only other thing to tease, I guess, is like we're gonna be doing some NBA stuff. So it's not just gonna be NFL from us, you know. Me and Joel both really like basketball. The playoffs are around the corner, so once the seeding gets kind of locked in and we know what the matchups are going to be in both the East and the West, we might even do the play-in. I guess like we can do like a little, like a little quick
the play-in. So
yeah, just like a play-in preview video. Obviously, it'll always have a betting lean to it. We'll give you some things that we like and we're targeting in those games, as well as give you some analysis and some predictions as to how we think the playoffs are going to shake out. Very much like the content we do for the NFL. So look forward to that. And yeah, me and Joel are looking forward to making more and more content for you guys.
Yes, sir. So you guys drop us a follow, like, subscribe, share. Like Ruben said, we're going to be, trying to expand into some other sports, starting with the NBA. We're kind of pretty pumped to do that. And then we'll be releasing a lot of NFL content as we get through the summer and the off season here. So it's going to be exciting, and hopefully you guys stay tuned. We're going to be trying to drop a lot of content. So yeah,
a lot of stuff to watch, especially in those dog days of summer where there's not a ton of sports besides baseball. Like baseball goes year round, but it gets kind of thin unless you're super into tennis and golf, I guess.
You're always on baseball, but I might need some time before I feel.
Yeah, the baseball bet's crazy. Hey, nobody could have foreseen a torpedo bat coming and the Yankees just mashing.
Yankees always up to something. I swear.
Yeah, I love it. But we want to thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the content, and yeah, make sure to join us again next time at the Sports Garden.